The shadow of a scaffold. In the year 1326, in the ancient city of Hereford, the people gathered in hushed anticipation. The air was cold, heavy with dread and expectation. At the center of the crowd stood a scaffold, draped in black. Upon it, bound and grim, was Hugh Despenser the Younger, once the most powerful man in England. His eyes darted across the sea of faces, some glaring with fury, others watching with morbid fascination. Not long ago, Despenser had ruled as though untouchable. He had lived in riches and arrogance, holding kings and nobles alike beneath his heel. But now, his fate was sealed. He was about to die the death of a traitor, a tyrant, and a thief, executed in a spectacle so brutal that even in medieval England, it would be remembered for centuries. This is the story of Hugh Despenser the Younger, how he clawed his way to power, how he ruled through fear and greed, and how, in the end, he fell with a scream that echoed across England. Chapter 1. The Rise of a Courtier. Hugh Despenser was not born to greatness. He was ambitious, clever, and dangerously opportunistic. Through a shrewd marriage to Eleanor de Clare, granddaughter of King Edward I, he tied his fate to the crown itself. This bond, more than any feat of arms or wisdom, opened the door to the royal court. At first, he was little more than a minor noble with influence through marriage. But Hugh knew how to flatter, how to twist words, how to win favor in the dangerous game of politics. Slowly, he rose in the eyes of King Edward II. Where others saw a weak king, Despenser saw opportunity. He became the king's closest companion, his favorite. He whispered into the royal ear, and soon his will became the king's will. With this influence, Despenser began to reshape his fortunes, seizing lands, enriching himself, and turning rivals into enemies. Chapter 2. Greed without limits. As his power grew, so too did his appetite. Despenser used his position not to serve England, but to strip it bare for his own gain. He confiscated estates, manipulated inheritances, and drove noble families into ruin. Widows and orphans, whose lands he should have protected, found themselves dispossessed, their birthrights stolen. Merchants and peasants alike came to fear his name. It was whispered that nothing was safe from Despenser's grasp. Not land, not wealth, not even honor. His greed was matched only by his cruelty. Those who resisted found themselves imprisoned, tortured, or executed under false charges. Entire families lived in terror, knowing that one word from Despenser could bring their destruction. England groaned under his tyranny. Yet so long as Edward II loved him, Despenser was untouchable. Chapter 3. The Reign of Terror. By 1322, Hugh Despenser the Younger was no longer merely a favorite. He was, in practice, the ruler of England. His father, Hugh Despenser the Elder, joined him in dominance, and together they became a dark shadow across the realm. Noble after noble fell victim to their schemes. The Marcher lords, guardians of the Welsh border, were stripped of their ancestral lands. Prominent barons were humiliated and crushed. The Despenser's enemies were exiled, their estates seized, their families cast into despair. It was not only the aristocracy that suffered. Common people, too, felt the iron fist of Despenser's ambition. Taxes rose, corruption spread, and the once proud kingdom sank into misery. All the while, Edward II stood helpless, enthralled by the man who had become his constant companion. The king's weakness and Despenser's arrogance drove England toward collapse. Chapter 4. Enemies gather in the shadows. But power breeds enemies, and tyranny always sows the seeds of rebellion. Among those who suffered most was Queen Isabella, the neglected wife of Edward II. Humiliated and ignored, she watched Despenser usurp her place, her authority, and her dignity. In secret, she began to plot. She forged alliances with exiled nobles, with the French crown, and most fatefully, with Roger Mortimer, one of the Marcher lords who had once felt the cruel hand of Despenser's greed. Together, Isabella and Mortimer built a force across the Channel. Their cause was simple: to free England from Despenser's grip and to end Edward's disastrous reign. In 1326, their fleet landed on English shores. The oppressed rose to join them. Towns and castles opened their gates. The kingdom, sick of tyranny, turned against its king and his hated favorite. Chapter 6. The Trial of a Tyrant. Dragged in chains before his enemies, Despenser stood accused of treason, theft, and unspeakable crimes against the realm. The charges were read aloud to a roaring crowd: corruption, extortion, and the violation of England's nobility and people. But in truth, there was no trial. His fate was already sealed. The people demanded vengeance, and Isabella would grant it. Despenser's sentence was death. Not the clean death of a noble knight, but the death reserved for traitors: hanging, drawing, and quartering. Chapter 7. The Execution at Hereford. On November 24th, 1326, the stage was set in Hereford. The scaffold loomed high, a grim monument to justice. Thousands gathered, eager to witness the fall of the man who had tormented them for so long. Hugh Despenser was dragged forward, trembling, his once proud face pale with terror. No longer the arrogant tyrant, he was a broken man, begging for mercy where he had once shown none. The executioners showed him none. He was stripped, tied to a ladder, and hoisted before the jeering crowd. They mocked him, spit upon him, cursed his name. Then the sentence was carried out in full. Hugh Despenser was hanged, but cut down before death could take him. He was mutilated, his body torn, his agony prolonged. Finally, his corpse was quartered, his remains sent to the corners of the realm as a warning. The man who had ruled England through greed and cruelty died in shame, destroyed by the very people he had sought to dominate. Epilogue: a lesson in power. With Despenser dead and Edward deposed, Isabella and Mortimer ruled in triumph. Yet even their power would not last. In time, they too would fall, victims of the same cycle of ambition and betrayal that had consumed Despenser. But the memory of Hugh Despenser's tyranny and his terrible end lingered. Chroniclers wrote of him as the embodiment of greed, corruption, and arrogance. His name became a curse, his fate a lesson, that those who rule through fear and selfishness may rise high, but they will fall harder still. And so the scaffold at Hereford stands in history not only as the end of a man, but as a reminder to all ages. Power gained through cruelty and greed is power doomed to destruction.